England, 1824. The crystal chandeliers of Westmoreland House blazed with light as London's elite twirled across the polished ballroom floor. Lady Adeline Humphrey stood at the periphery, her gloved fingers wrapped tightly around a delicate champagne flute, observing the spectacle before her with a practiced detachment. At 26, she had weathered enough social seasons to recognize the patterns, the calculated glances, the strategic introductions, the careful positioning of eligible daughters before wealthy bachelors. "You appear thoroughly unimpressed by tonight's festivities," a deep voice remarked from behind her. Adeline did not need to turn to know who addressed her. That voice, rich as aged brandy and just as intoxicating, belonged to Frederick Montrose, the Duke of Ravencourt. She had successfully avoided him for 3 consecutive events, but it seemed her luck had finally run dry. "Your Grace," she acknowledged, turning with deliberate slowness. "I find these gatherings rather predictable after so many seasons." Frederick Montrose stood before her, tall and imposing in his impeccably tailored evening attire. His dark hair, slightly too long to be considered fashionable, framed features that painters had begged to capture. A strong jaw, aristocratic nose, and eyes the color of storm clouds. Those eyes now studied her with unmistakable interest. "Predictable. Perhaps you've been attending the wrong gatherings, Lady Adeline. Or perhaps I simply recognize the same play with different actors," she countered. A smile touched his lips, refreshingly candid. Most ladies would have offered some vapid compliment about the orchestra or the decoration. "I am not most ladies, Your Grace. That much is abundantly clear." His gaze intensified. "Would you honor me with a dance?" Adeline hesitated. Frederick Montrose's reputation preceded him. Charming, wealthy, and utterly unattainable. Women across London whispered about his brief, passionate courtships that inevitably ended in heartbreak. Not that Adeline had paid particular attention to such gossip, of course. "I'm afraid my dance card is full," she lied smoothly. "Is it?" He raised an eyebrow, his lips quirking upward. "Show me." Caught in her falsehood, Adeline felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It would be impolite to refuse the other gentlemen who have requested dances. Yet I see no queue of eager suitors awaiting your hand." His voice dropped lower. "One dance, Lady Adeline? Surely that cannot harm your carefully guarded reputation." Before she could formulate another excuse, the orchestra began a waltz. Frederick extended his hand, and against her better judgment, Adeline placed her fingers in his palm. The moment they touched, a curious sensation, like lightning captured in a bottle, shot up her arm. As he led her onto the dance floor, whispers followed. The Duke of Ravencourt rarely danced, and when he did, it signaled the beginning of another of his infamous pursuits. Adeline felt dozens of eyes tracking their movement, some curious, others envious, a few pitying. "People are staring," she murmured, as his hand settled at her waist. "Let them," he replied simply. "I'm certainly not paying them any mind." They began to move, and Adeline was surprised to discover what an accomplished dancer he was. He led with confidence, but without the forceful steering that many gentlemen employed. Instead, he guided her with subtle pressure, anticipating her movements before she made them. "You dance well," she admitted reluctantly. "As do you." His gaze never left her face. "Though you seem determined not to enjoy it. I'm merely cautious about the company I keep." A flash of something, hurt perhaps, crossed his features before his expression settled back into polite interest. "Ah, so you believe the tales they tell of me. Should I not? I would prefer you form your own impressions, Lady Adeline." The waltz continued, and despite herself, Adeline found she was enjoying their dance. Frederick moved with natural grace, and when he occasionally drew her closer than propriety strictly allowed, she did not protest. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "There are dozens of younger, more beautiful ladies present tonight." Frederick's grip tightened slightly. "Beauty is common. Intelligence and sincerity are rare commodities in these circles. Flattery will get you nowhere, Your Grace. It isn't flattery if it's true." He spun her elegantly as the music swelled. "I've watched you these past months. You navigate society with precision but stand apart from it. You listen more than you speak. You observe rather than perform." His voice lowered. "I find myself curious." The dance ended too quickly, and as Frederick escorted her back to the edge of the ballroom, he surprised her by bowing over her hand, and pressing his lips to her gloved knuckles, a gesture just bold enough to raise eyebrows, but not quite scandalous. "I look forward to our next encounter, Lady Adeline," he murmured before straightening. "More than you can possibly imagine." As he walked away, Adeline realized her heart was racing. She told herself it was merely the exertion of the dance, nothing more. Yet she could not deny the lingering warmth where his hand had held hers, nor could she ignore the fact that, for the first time in years, a social engagement had left her feeling truly alive. Over the following weeks, Frederick Montrose seemed to materialize at every event Adeline attended. At Lady Harrington's musical soiree, he appeared at her side with refreshments precisely when she felt parched. During the Bennington garden party, he rescued her from a tedious conversation with an elderly viscount who had been expounding on the breeding habits of his prized hounds. At the theatre, she discovered he had somehow secured the box adjacent to hers. Each time their conversations grew longer, more intimate. She learned he had a passion for astronomy and had built an observatory at his country estate. He discovered her secret fondness for Gothic novels, which she defended with spirited arguments about their literary merit. They debated politics, art, and philosophy with equal fervor. Despite her initial misgivings, Adeline found herself looking forward to these encounters. Frederick was unlike any man she had met, educated without being condescending, confident without arrogance, and genuinely interested in her thoughts rather than merely her dowry or connections. On a mild evening in early May at the Countess of Devonshire's annual ball, Frederick found Adeline in the conservatory, seeking a moment's respite from the crowded ballroom. "Hiding, Lady Adeline?" he asked, approaching her with a teasing smile. "Merely taking a breath of air, Your Grace." She turned to face him. "Though I suspect you knew precisely where to find me. I confess I might have noticed your departure." He moved closer, close enough that she could detect the faint scent of sandalwood and cedar that clung to his clothing. "Are you enjoying the evening?" "It has improved considerably in the last minute," she replied, before she could stop herself. Frederick's eyes widened slightly before crinkling at the corners. "Lady Adeline, I do believe that was a compliment." "Perhaps it was," she conceded, turning to study a nearby orchid. "In that case, I shall treasure it." He reached past her to touch a petal of the flower, his arm briefly brushing hers. "These rare blooms from foreign shores remind me of you." "Exotic and unusual," she quipped. "Beautiful, but discerning about when and for whom they bloom." His voice had dropped to a murmur. "Worth every moment of patience required to witness their flowering." Adeline felt her breath catch. She knew she should step away, make some light remark to diffuse the tension crackling between them. Instead, she remained still as Frederick slowly, deliberately took her hand in his. "I find myself thinking of you at the most inconvenient times," he admitted, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "During meetings with my solicitor, while reviewing estate accounts when I should be sleeping." "Your Grace," "Frederick," he corrected gently, "when we are alone at least, could you not call me by my name?" The request was improper, intimate, yet Adeline found herself nodding. "Frederick." The sound of his name on her lips seemed to affect him deeply. His eyes darkened, and he took a half-step closer. "Adeline," he responded, testing her given name without its formal title. "May I call on you tomorrow, properly, at your father's home?" The question startled her. Calling formally would indicate serious intentions, courtship rather than flirtation. "You wish to court me?" "I wish to know you better," he replied carefully. "Away from the masks we all wear in society." Warning bells sounded in Adeline's mind. How many ladies had heard similar words from those same lips, only to be forgotten when a new fascination caught his attention? Yet the sincerity in his expression made her hesitate. "My father would expect certain assurances about your intentions," she warned, "and he shall have them." Frederick's expression grew serious. "I am not playing a game, Adeline." Before she could respond, the conservatory doors opened, admitting a group of laughing guests. The moment shattered, Frederick stepped back, though his eyes remained fixed on her face. "Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, he said quietly. "Unless you forbid it?" She should refuse. She knew she should. Instead, Adeline nodded once, briefly, before slipping past him and rejoining the ball. That night, as her lady's maid helped her prepare for bed, Adeline's thoughts remained fixed on the Duke of Ravencourt. on his remarkable eyes that seemed to see past her carefully constructed facade, on the warmth of his hand as it held hers, on the way her name sounded in his deep voice. With sudden clarity she recognized the precipice before her. She was falling in love with Frederick Montrose, precisely what she had sworn never to allow. Worse still, she suspected he was merely adding her to his collection of conquests, a new challenge to overcome before moving on to the next. She couldn't bear it. Wouldn't bear it. By the time dawn broke, Adeline had made her decision. She hastily penned a note to her father, explaining an urgent desire to visit her aunt in Derbyshire, packed a small valise, and departed before the household fully stirred. She would flee London. Flee temptation. Flee the inevitable heartbreak that awaited if she surrendered to Frederick Montrose's charm. As her carriage rattled over the cobblestones, taking her away from the city and the man who threatened her peace, Adeline told herself she was being sensible, practical, wise. She ignored the hollow feeling in her chest that whispered otherwise. The sky darkened ominously as Frederick Montrose approached the Humphrey residence the following afternoon. He had spent an unusually long time selecting his attire and instructing his valet on the precise arrangement of his cravat, details he typically attended to with casual indifference. Today, however, seemed to demand perfection. The butler who answered his knock regarded him with barely concealed suspicion. "I regret to inform you that Lady Adeline is not at home, Your Grace." Frederick frowned. "Not at home? I was expected." "I have received no such instructions, sir." The butler's expression remained impassive. "Lady Adeline departed for Derbyshire early this morning, most unexpected according to the household." A cold sensation settled in Frederick's stomach. "I see. Might I speak with the Earl?" "Lord Humphrey is attending Parliament today." Frederick nodded curtly and returned to his waiting carriage, his mind racing. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Adeline had fled from him, from whatever had sparked between them in the conservatory. "Return home," he instructed his driver, before settling back against the leather squabs. As his carriage navigated London's busy streets, Frederick struggled to understand his own reaction. Disappointment, certainly, but beneath it lurked something deeper, more visceral. He had pursued many women during his decade in society, enjoyed their company, and parted ways without lasting regrets. Yet the thought of Adeline Humphrey slipping away left him feeling hollow. By the time he reached Ravenscourt House, he had made his decision. He strode directly to his study and summoned his most trusted servant. "Harrison, have my travelling coach prepared immediately. I'll need provisions for a journey to Derbyshire." "Derbyshire, Your Grace, but the Westmere negotiations can wait." Frederick was already penning a note to his solicitor. "This cannot." 3 hours later, Frederick's coach thundered north along the Great North Road. The weather had deteriorated rapidly, rain lashing against the windows as thunder rumbled overhead. Inside, Frederick reviewed what little he knew of Adeline's connections in Derbyshire. Her mother's sister, Lady Eleanor Whitmore, resided at Briarwood Hall near Matlock. It was the most logical destination for a hasty retreat. As evening fell, the storm intensified. Twice his driver was forced to stop, as wind-felled branches blocked their path. At an inn where they paused to change horses, the proprietor warned against continuing. "Roads'll be flooded ahead, my lord. No sense risking it till morning." Frederick pressed a gold sovereign into the man's palm. "I'll double your best team if they can get us to Matlock tonight." The innkeeper hesitated, then nodded. "On your head be it, Your Grace." Back in the coach as they lurched through the darkness, Frederick questioned his own sanity. He was the Duke of Ravenscourt, with responsibilities to an ancient title and vast estates. Yet here he was, chasing after a woman who had clearly chosen to avoid him, risking life and limb in a tempest that sensible travellers had sought shelter from. Why? What was it about Adeline Humphrey that compelled him so? It wasn't merely her beauty, though she possessed that in abundance. Honey-brown hair that caught the light, eyes that shifted between green and hazel depending on her mood, a smile that transformed her entire countenance when genuinely amused. No, it was something less tangible. Her sharp intellect, her refusal to simper or flatter, the glimpses of vulnerability beneath her composed exterior. For the first time in his life, Frederick had met a woman he could not easily classify or predict, and it fascinated him. The journey that should have taken a day stretched into night as the storm worsened. Near midnight, with visibility reduced to mere yards ahead, disaster struck. A flash flood had washed out part of the road, sending the coach lurching sickeningly to one side. Frederick was thrown against the door as the vehicle tilted precariously. Shouting and the panicked whinnying of horses filled the air. Frederick forced the door open and pulled himself out into the driving rain. One of the horses had fallen, the coach's front wheels sunk deep in mud and water. "Your Grace!" his driver called over the howling wind. "We can't go further tonight!" Frederick surveyed their situation grimly. They were perhaps 5 miles from Matlock, close but impossible to reach with a damaged coach in this weather. "Unhitch the horses," he ordered. "I'll continue on horseback. You and Peter seek shelter at the nearest farm." "Alone? In this?" The driver looked aghast. "It's madness, sir." Nevertheless, Frederick had already removed his soaked greatcoat and was checking the saddle on his grey stallion. Minutes later, he was mounted and pressing forward through the storm, guided only by occasional flashes of lightning and his own determination. The rain stung his face, and wind threatened to unseat him more than once. His stallion, Atlas, struggled against the elements, but pushed onward at his master's urging. Frederick had never considered himself a romantic man, practical, logical, even calculating in his affairs. These were the qualities that had served him well. Yet here he was, enacting a scene worthy of the Gothic novels Adeline secretly adored, and he couldn't bring himself to regret it. If he survived this night, he would have quite a story to tell her. If she would listen. Adeline stood at the window of her aunt's drawing room, watching lightning split the night sky. She had arrived at Briarwood Hall that afternoon, much to Lady Eleanor Whitmore's surprise. Her explanation, needing respite from London's social whirl, had been accepted with minimal questioning, though her aunt's shrewd gaze suggested she suspected there was more to the story. "You should try to sleep, my dear," Lady Eleanor said, entering the room with a candle. "This storm shows no sign of abating, and you look exhausted." "In a moment, Aunt." Adeline pressed a hand to the cool glass. "I find it rather soothing." "Soothing?" Lady Eleanor chuckled. "Most young ladies would be cowering beneath their covers." "I've never been most young ladies," Adeline murmured. "No, indeed." Her aunt settled into a chair. "Which makes me all the more curious about what or whom you're running from." Adeline turned in surprise. "I'm not running. Spare me, child. I was young once. That haunted look in your eyes speaks of a man, not social fatigue." Lady Eleanor sipped her tea. "I assume he's unsuitable. Penniless. Married, perhaps." "Quite the opposite," Adeline sighed. "He's one of the most eligible bachelors in England." "Ah, so the problem is that he's too suitable. How peculiar." "It's not that simple." Adeline returned to the window. "The Duke of Ravencourt has a reputation." Lady Eleanor straightened. "Ravencourt? Frederick Montrose?" When Adeline nodded, her aunt set down her teacup with a decisive clink. "Well, that is interesting. You know of him?" "My dear, every person of consequence knows of him. Handsome as sin, rich as Croesus, and supposedly leaves a trail of broken hearts wherever he goes." Lady Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Though I've always wondered about those rumors." "What do you mean?" "Gossip has a way of magnifying truths, especially when the subject is young, wealthy, and disinclined to defend himself." She studied her niece. "Is he pursuing you?" Adeline hesitated. "He asked to call on me formally, to court me." "And you fled?" Lady Eleanor shook her head. "May I ask why?" "Because I fear I could love him." The admission burst from Adeline with unexpected force. "And I refuse to become another conquest, another story whispered about at tea parties and balls." Her aunt's expression softened. "Oh, my dear girl, is protecting your heart worth denying its desires completely? Sometimes we must risk pain for the chance at happiness." Before Adeline could respond, a commotion arose from the entrance hall, voices raised in alarm, the heavy oak door being thrown open. Lady Eleanor rose, frowning. "What in heaven's name—" A servant appeared at the drawing-room entrance, wide-eyed. "My lady, forgive the intrusion. There's a gentleman, he's half drowned, insisting on seeing Lady Adeline immediately." Adeline's heart stuttered. "What gentleman?" The answer came not from the servant, but from the tall figure who appeared behind him, drenched and mud-splattered but unmistakable. "Your Grace!" Lady Eleanor exclaimed. Good heavens, you look as though you've swum the channel. Frederick Montrose, Duke of Ravencourt, stood in the doorway, water pooling around his boots. His usually immaculate appearance was utterly destroyed, riding clothes plastered to his body, dark hair dripping onto his shoulders, face pale with exhaustion. Yet his eyes, when they found Adeline, blazed with an intensity that stole her breath. "Lady Whitmore," he acknowledged with a slight bow. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance. The storm made travel challenging." "So I see." Lady Eleanor glanced between him and her niece, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "I believe I shall check on the kitchens regarding some hot soup for our unexpected guest. Adeline, perhaps you could find His Grace a towel." With that strategic retreat, Lady Eleanor swept from the room, leaving Adeline alone with the sodden Duke. For a long moment, neither spoke. Frederick remained by the door as if afraid to approach, while Adeline stood frozen by the window, unable to believe the evidence of her eyes. "You're here," she finally whispered. "How? Why?" "You ran." His voice was hoarse, either from emotion or from battling the elements. "I followed." "In this weather, you could have been killed." "A risk I deemed acceptable." He took a cautious step forward. "Why did you leave, Adeline?" She turned away, unable to meet his gaze. "It seemed the wisest course." "Wise?" He moved closer, his footsteps squelching slightly. "To flee without a word? To disappear when I had made my intentions clear?" "Your intentions?" Adeline whirled back to face him. "Your intentions with me or with the countless ladies before me who thought themselves special until you tired of them?" Pain flashed across his features. "Is that what you think of me?" "It's what everyone knows of you. Everyone is wrong." Another step closer. "Or perhaps they were right once but no longer." Adeline shook her head, backing away until she felt the window ledge press against her. Pretty words from practiced lips. "Damn it, Adeline!" Frustration broke through his composure. "Do you think I would ride through a tempest, nearly drown in a flood and arrive at your aunt's doorstep looking like a half-drowned rat, if this were merely some practiced seduction?" His vehemence startled her into silence. Frederick raked a hand through his wet hair, leaving it standing in disarray. "I have never pursued a woman as I have pursued you. I have never felt this maddening mixture of admiration, fascination, and terror." "Terror?" she echoed, confused. "Yes, terror." He laughed without humor. "Terror that you'll see through me. Terror that you'll discover I'm not nearly as composed or confident as I pretend to be. Terror that when you truly know me, you'll find me wanting." Adeline stared at him, seeing for the first time the vulnerability beneath his aristocratic bearing. "I don't understand." "Neither do I," he admitted, his voice dropping. "I only know that when I learned you had gone, I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear the thought of never seeing that spark in your eyes when you challenge my opinions, or the way your lips quirk when you're trying not to smile at something outrageous I've said." He moved forward again, close enough now that she could see droplets of water clinging to his eyelashes. "I'm not asking you to love me, Adeline, not yet. I'm asking for a chance to prove that the man I am is not the man rumor claims." "And if I refuse?" she whispered. "Then I'll leave at first light and trouble you no more." His gaze held hers. "But know this. I rode through that storm not because I'm dramatic or impulsive, but because the thought of losing you before we've even begun was unbearable." As if to punctuate his declaration, thunder crashed overhead, rattling the windows. In that flash of lightning, Adeline saw something in Frederick's eyes that no practiced libertine could feign. Raw, unguarded emotion. "You're shivering," she said softly, noticing the tremors running through his tall frame. "It's rather cold when one is soaking wet," he acknowledged with a wry smile. Adeline hesitated, then moved to the sideboard where a stack of clean linens was kept. She selected a large cloth and approached him cautiously. "You need to get dry before you catch your death." She held out the cloth. When he reached for it, she didn't release it immediately. "I haven't decided yet whether to give you that chance." Frederick nodded solemnly. "Fair enough. But know this, Adeline Humphrey. I am not letting you go without a fight. I'll prove myself worthy of your trust if it takes a lifetime." As their fingers brushed over the cloth, Adeline felt that same spark of connection that had startled her during their first dance. This time she didn't pull away immediately. "I suppose," she said carefully, that everyone deserves the opportunity to be judged on their own merits rather than on rumor. Hope brightened his exhausted features. Does that mean? It means I'll remain at Briarwood Hall for now rather than fleeing to Scotland, she interrupted with a small smile. And you may call on me, properly, in daylight, without dramatic entrances during thunderstorms, while I'm here. Frederick's answering smile transformed his face, lending him a boyish charm at odds with his usual sophisticated demeanor. I shall count the hours between visits. You shall change into dry clothes and drink hot soup before you catch pneumonia, she countered. My aunt would never forgive me if you expired on her drawing-room floor. As if summoned by her words, Lady Eleanor reappeared with a servant carrying a tray. Ah, I see you two have reached some understanding. Excellent. Your Grace, I've had a room prepared. My late husband's clothes should fit you passably well until yours can be dried. Frederick bowed formally to both ladies. So you are too kind, Lady Whitmore. I shall endeavour to be a less bedraggled guest tomorrow. As he followed the servant from the room, he glanced back once at Adeline. The look they exchanged contained no words but spoke volumes, a challenge issued and accepted, a journey begun. When he had gone, Lady Eleanor settled back into her chair with a satisfied expression. Well, my dear, it seems your Duke is rather more interesting than rumours suggest. He's not my Duke, Adeline protested weakly. Not yet, perhaps. Her aunt smiled knowingly. But a man who rides through a storm like that? I suspect it's merely a matter of time. Adeline returned to her window, watching as the rain continued to fall. The storm outside might be raging, but the tempest in her heart had unexpectedly calmed. In its place bloomed something fragile but unmistakable: hope. Over the following fortnight, a peculiar routine developed at Briarwood Hall. Each morning, promptly at 11, the Duke of Ravencourt would arrive from the village inn where he had taken rooms. He would spend the day in Adeline's company, sometimes accompanied by Lady Eleanor, often not. They walked the estate grounds when weather permitted, played chess in the drawing-room when it didn't, and conversed about everything from Renaissance art to the political tensions in Parliament. To Adeline's surprise, Frederick proved himself an attentive listener, a thoughtful conversationalist, and possessed of a dry wit that frequently startled her into laughter. There was no trace of the calculating seducer society painted him to be, at least not in the conventional sense. If he was seducing her, it was through intellectual engagement rather than flowery compliments or bold advances. On the 10th day of his visits, they strolled along a path that wound through Lady Eleanor's prized rose garden. The afternoon was mild, the sky a watercolour wash of blue and white. You never speak of your family, Adeline observed, as they paused beside a particularly fragrant bloom. Frederick's expression shuttered slightly. There isn't much to tell. My parents died when I was young. My father from heart failure, my mother from influenza the following winter. I'm sorry, she said softly. You were raised by guardians, then? By a succession of tutors and my father's steward until I reached majority. He plucked a leaf from a nearby bush, twirling it between his fingers. Ravencourt House was a rather silent place during those years. Adeline tried to imagine a young Frederick wandering the halls of a grand, empty mansion. The image brought an unexpected ache to her chest. No siblings? None. His mouth quirked in a humorless smile. The solitary heir to the solitary duke. A fitting legacy. She sensed depths of pain beneath his casual tone. Is that why you embraced society so thoroughly once you came of age? To escape the silence? Frederick glanced at her sharply. You're more perceptive than most, Lady Adeline. We agreed to dispense with formalities when alone, did we not? She reminded him gently. Indeed we did, Adeline. He offered his arm as they continued walking. And yes, I suppose that's part of it. London offered noise, distraction, endless entertainment, and a parade of admiring ladies, she couldn't help adding. Frederick sighed. I won't deny I've enjoyed female company, but the stories of my conquests are greatly exaggerated. When she raised a skeptical eyebrow, he insisted, Truly, I've been linked to far more ladies than I've actually courted. And why is that, do you think? Because I never bothered to correct the assumptions. He shrugged. A certain reputation can be useful. It keeps expectations low, prevents entanglements. Until now, Adeline asked quietly. Frederick stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Until now, he agreed, his voice dropping to a near whisper. You're different, Adeline. You always have been. The intensity in his gaze made her heart flutter treacherously. How so? You see me? He reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw, and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Not the title or the wealth or the rumors. Just me. Adeline stood perfectly still, caught between the desire to lean into his touch and the instinct to protect herself. I'm trying to, she admitted. His fingers lingered against her cheek. That's more than anyone else has done. The moment stretched between them, fraught with unspoken emotion. In the dappled sunlight, Frederick's eyes appeared almost silver, fixed on her with a vulnerability that belied his confident demeanor. Adeline realized with startling clarity that she was already falling in love with him, not the notorious Duke of Ravencourt, but the complex, intelligent man beneath the title. The spell was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps on the gravel path. Frederick stepped back, just as Lady Eleanor's housekeeper appeared around the bend. "Begging your pardon, milady, your grace," the woman curtsied. "A messenger has arrived from London with urgent correspondence for Lady Adeline." Puzzled, Adeline followed the housekeeper back to the house, Frederick at her side. In the entrance hall, a travel-worn courier waited with a leather dispatch case. "From your father, my lady," he explained, presenting her with a sealed letter. Adeline broke the seal and scanned the contents, her expression growing troubled. "Father has been taken ill," she explained to Frederick. "Nothing dire, but he requests my return to London immediately." "I understand." Frederick's face revealed nothing of his thoughts. "I shall escort you, of course." "There's no need," and she began. "There is every need," he interrupted firmly. "I would never allow you to travel unaccompanied." Lady Eleanor, who had joined them, nodded approvingly. "Quite right, your grace. I shall have Adeline's things packed at once. You can depart first thing tomorrow." As preparations whirled around her, Adeline found herself watching Frederick direct the servants regarding travel arrangements, his natural authority ensuring everything would proceed smoothly. The thought of returning to London, of facing society's scrutiny of their developing relationship, filled her with trepidation. Yet the prospect of journeying with him, of continuing whatever was blossoming between them, kindled an excitement she couldn't deny. The journey to London proved surprisingly pleasant. Frederick had arranged for his repaired travelling coach, which offered every comfort. Their conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences as they watched the countryside roll past. At inns, where they stopped to change horses, Frederick was attentive but scrupulously proper, never giving the slightest cause for gossip. By the time they reached London, Adeline found herself reluctant for their journey to end. As the coach approached her father's townhouse in Grosvenor Square, Frederick reached across to take her hand. "May I call tomorrow to inquire after your father's health?" "I would like that," she replied, squeezing his fingers lightly. His smile warmed her more than the afternoon sun streaming through the coach windows. "Until tomorrow, then." As a footman helped her alight from the carriage, Adeline felt the weight of Frederick's gaze following her. She turned back once, offering a small wave before entering the house. The expression on his face, a mixture of tenderness and something deeper, more powerful, stayed with her as she was welcomed home by the household staff. To her relief, she found her father much improved. The Earl of Westbrook was sitting up in bed, colour returned to his cheeks, irritably instructing his valet on the proper arrangement of his correspondence. "Father," she hurried to embrace him. "Your letter had me so worried." "A mere inflammation of the lungs, my dear. Nothing to fret over." He patted her hand. "But I'm glad to have you home. London has been dreadfully dull without you." Adeline raised an eyebrow. "Dull enough that you summoned me back from Derbyshire." Her father had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Well, perhaps there were additional considerations. Lady Harrington's summer ball is in 3 days, and I had promised you would attend." "I see." Adeline tried to mask her disappointment. She had rushed back to London not for a health crisis, but for a social obligation. "Besides," the Earl continued, "I've received an interesting visit in your absence. The Duke of Ravencourt called to formally request permission to court you." He fixed her with a penetrating look, "a development you neglected to mention in your correspondence." Adeline felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's relatively recent." Her father studied her. "You are aware of his reputation, I presume?" "I'm aware of what people say," she replied carefully. "I'm less certain how much of it is true." "Wise girl." The Earl nodded approvingly. "I've known Frederick since he was a boy. His father was a good friend, though a distant parent. The young Duke has had his indiscretions, certainly, but there's solid timber there. Surprised by his assessment, Adeline asked, "Then you don't object?" "I neither object nor approve just yet." He shuffled the papers on his lap. "I told His Grace he might call on you with proper chaperonage. The rest depends on how he conducts himself, and how you feel." Relief washed through her. "Thank you, Father. Now," he said, his tone becoming more brisk, "tell me about Briarwood. Is your aunt still terrorizing the local gentry with her radical opinions?" As Adeline settled into a chair beside his bed, recounting the highlights of her stay, omitting certain dramatic storm-drenched arrivals, she felt a curious sensation of having crossed some invisible threshold. Her flight to Derbyshire had been impulsive, driven by fear. Her return to London felt deliberate, purposeful, a choice to face whatever might come next. Lady Harrington's summer ball was the highlight of the late season, an event no one of consequence would miss. The ballroom of Harrington House blazed with hundreds of candles, the orchestra played a spirited quadrille, and London's elite circulated in their finest attire. Adeline stood with her father near one of the tall windows, acknowledging greetings from acquaintances while scanning the crowd for one particular face. Frederick had called daily since their return, but always during proper visiting hours, always with her father or a companion present. Their interactions had been pleasant, but necessarily restrained. Tonight would be their first opportunity for something approaching privacy amid the crowd. "He'll be here," her father murmured, noticing her distraction. "I'm sure I don't know whom you mean," she replied primly. The Earl chuckled. "Of course not. Just as I'm sure you haven't glanced at the entrance every 30 seconds for the past half hour." Before Adeline could formulate a suitably indignant response, a ripple of interest passed through the crowd. She turned to see Frederick Montrose entering the ballroom, resplendent in formal evening attire, his dark hair gleaming in the candlelight. Several young ladies immediately gravitated toward him, offering smiles and batting eyelashes. Frederick acknowledged them politely, but continued scanning the room until his gaze locked with Adeline's. The smile that transformed his features then was so genuinely delighted, so lacking in artifice, that Adeline couldn't help but respond in kind. He made his way to her side with single-minded determination, bowing to the Earl before turning to her. "Lady Adeline, you look radiant tonight." She wore a gown of deep emerald silk that complemented her colouring perfectly. "Thank you, Your Grace, I'm pleased you could attend. Wild horses couldn't have kept me away." He glanced at her father. "Lord Westbrook, you're looking much recovered." "Indeed." The Earl nodded. "Well enough to stand guard, as you see." Frederick's lips twitched with suppressed amusement. "I would expect nothing less, sir." He turned back to Adeline. "Might I hope for a dance later this evening?" "You may claim the next waltz if you wish," she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "With your father's permission?" Frederick looked to the Earl, who nodded his assent. "Mind you keep a proper distance, Ravencourt," he warned, though his tone was more indulgent than stern. As Frederick moved away to greet other guests until their dance, Adeline noticed the curious glances directed their way. News of the Duke of Ravencourt's interest in the Earl of Westbrook's daughter had clearly circulated through society. Some expressions were speculative, others envious, a few openly skeptical. One face in particular caught her attention, a strikingly beautiful woman in a gown of deep crimson, watching Frederick with unmistakable calculation in her eyes. The lady's gaze shifted to Adeline, assessing her with cool disdain before a practiced smile curved her lips. "Who is that?" Adeline asked her father quietly. The Earl followed her gaze. "Ah, Lady Caroline Sedley, widow of Baron Sedley." His expression grew guarded. She and Ravencourt were connected at one time, rather intensely if gossip is to be believed. Adeline felt a chill of apprehension. Lady Caroline was everything she was not. Classically beautiful, overtly sensual, clearly comfortable wielding her feminine allure as a weapon. If this woman had once held Frederick's heart, what chance did Adeline stand? Before she could dwell further on this unwelcome development, the orchestra began a waltz. Frederick appeared at her side, hand extended. "May I?" Pushing aside her concerns, Adeline placed her fingers in his and allowed him to lead her onto the dance floor. The moment his hand settled at her waist, the same electric awareness that had marked their first dance returned tenfold. They began to move in perfect synchrony, as if they had waltzed together 100 times before. "I've missed our conversations," Frederick murmured, just loud enough for her to hear. "Proper visiting hours are dreadfully restrictive." "Society has its rules for good reason," she reminded him, though her tone lacked conviction. "Rules designed to protect young ladies from men with dishonorable intentions." His grip tightened slightly. "My intentions toward you, Adeline, are entirely honorable." The implication of his words sent a tremor through her. "You barely know me," she protested weakly. "I know enough." His gaze held hers, unwavering. "I know your mind is as beautiful as your face. I know your courage and your principles. I know that when you smile, truly smile, not the polite version you offer in company, it transforms your entire countenance." Adeline swallowed hard. "Frederick, I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "I suspect I began falling that first night we danced. I tried to deny it, to approach this logically, but there it is, the simple, terrifying truth." The waltz continued around them, but Adeline felt as though they had stepped outside time, enclosed in a bubble where only they existed. "You shouldn't say such things here," she whispered, though her heart soared at his declaration. "Should I wait for a more appropriate moment?" A hint of his customary humor returned. "Perhaps during a morning call with your father dozing in the corner and your companion pretending not to eavesdrop?" Despite herself, Adeline laughed. "You are impossible." "On the contrary," his expression grew serious again. "With you I find everything possible, including a future I never imagined wanting." The music drew to a close, forcing them to separate. Frederick bowed over her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that lingered just long enough to skirt the boundaries of propriety. As he escorted her back to her father, Adeline felt as though she were floating, barely aware of the speculative glances that followed them. Her euphoria was short-lived, however. As her father engaged Frederick in conversation, a rustle of silk announced Lady Caroline Sedley's approach. "Your Grace," the widow purred, placing a proprietary hand on Frederick's arm. "How neglectful you've been. Not a single visit since your return to town." Frederick's posture stiffened. "Lady Sedley, allow me to present Lady Adeline Humphrey and her father, the Earl of Westbrook." Caroline barely acknowledged them before returning her attention to Frederick. "I require a word with you, Your Grace, about a personal matter. Another time, perhaps." Frederick's tone was cool, but Caroline's grip on his arm tightened. "I'm afraid it's rather urgent." Her smile held an edge of steel. "You wouldn't want me to discuss it here, would you? In such mixed company?" Something like alarm flashed in Frederick's eyes. He glanced apologetically at Adeline and her father. "If you'll excuse me for a moment." As he allowed Caroline to lead him toward a less crowded corner of the ballroom, Adeline fought against a surge of jealousy and uncertainty. The familiar closeness between them was unmistakable, as was the hint of triumph in Caroline's expression as she glanced back over her shoulder. "Don't fret, my dear," her father murmured. "Old entanglements are rarely as threatening as they appear." "I'm not fretting," Adeline lied, forcing her attention to the dancers. But she couldn't help tracking Frederick's progress around the edge of the ballroom, or noting how Caroline leaned close to speak in his ear. Whatever she said caused Frederick's expression to darken. When he returned to Adeline's side minutes later, a shadow had fallen over his earlier good humor. "Is everything all right?" she asked quietly. "Perfectly." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "An old acquaintance making inconsequential demands on my time. Nothing worth discussing." But Adeline wasn't convinced. Throughout the remainder of the evening, she caught Frederick watching Lady Caroline with an unreadable expression. The widow, for her part, made a show of circulating among the guests, her laughter slightly too loud, her gestures calculated to display her considerable physical attributes to best advantage. As the ball drew to a close, Frederick escorted Adeline and her father to their carriage. When the Earl stepped ahead to speak with their driver, Frederick took Adeline's hand. "Don't let Caroline's theatrics trouble you," he said softly. "She belongs to a past I have no desire to revisit." "You owe me no explanations," Adeline replied, striving for a lightness she didn't feel. "Perhaps not." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But I want you to understand that whatever existed between us ended long ago. She means nothing to me now." The vehemence in his tone was reassuring, Yet Adeline couldn't shake the impression that there was more to the story than he was sharing. Before she could press further, her father returned, and the moment for confidences passed. Frederick handed her into the carriage with exquisite courtesy. "Until tomorrow," he promised. "I shall call in the afternoon." As their carriage pulled away, Adeline glanced back to see Frederick still standing where they'd left him, a solitary figure framed by the lights of Harrington House. The image stayed with her long after she returned home. The man who claimed to be falling in love with her, yet whose past clearly held secrets she had yet to uncover. Frederick did not call the following afternoon as promised, nor did he send a note explaining his absence. Adeline tried to quell her disappointment, reminding herself that a duke had many responsibilities that might demand his immediate attention. Yet when a second day passed without word, she began to worry. Had Lady Caroline's mysterious urgent matter somehow interfered with whatever was growing between them? Had Frederick reconsidered his declaration in the cold light of day? On the third afternoon, as Adeline sat in the drawing-room attempting to focus on her embroidery, the butler appeared with an envelope on a silver tray. "From His Grace the Duke of Ravencourt, my lady." Trying to disguise her eagerness, Adeline took the letter and broke the seal. Inside was a brief note in Frederick's bold handwriting. "My dearest Adeline, forgive my unconscionable silence these past days. Urgent business required my immediate attention at Ravencourt Hall in Surrey. I write now from the road, returning to London with all haste. There are matters we must discuss, explanations I owe you. If agreeable, I shall call tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Until then, I remain entirely yours." Frederick. Adeline read the note 3 times, searching for clues between the carefully penned lines. The formal tone was unlike the Frederick she had come to know, and the vague reference to matters we must discuss left her uneasy. Still, the signature, "entirely yours," offered reassurance that his feelings remained unchanged. When Frederick's carriage arrived the following afternoon, Adeline was waiting in the drawing-room, a novel open but unread in her lap. The butler announced him, and Frederick entered, bowing formally to her father, who sat by the window, before turning to her. Adeline was shocked by his appearance. Though immaculately dressed as always, Frederick looked as though he hadn't slept in days. Dark shadows underscored his eyes, and tension lined his mouth. When he took her hand and raised it to his lips, she felt a slight tremor in his fingers. "Lady Adeline, Lord Westbrook, thank you for receiving me." "Your note suggested urgency," her father observed. "Is everything well?" Frederick hesitated. "I find myself in need of a private conversation with Lady Adeline. With your permission, sir." The Earl studied him for a long moment. "The garden, perhaps? Within sight of the house, but beyond earshot of curious servants." "Thank you." Frederick inclined his head gratefully. Minutes later, Adeline found herself walking beside Frederick along a gravel path that wound through her father's carefully tended garden. The Earl had positioned himself strategically at a window overlooking their route, present but not intrusive. Frederick remained silent until they reached a small stone bench partially screened by ornamental shrubs. "Will you sit with me?" Adeline complied, arranging her skirts while her heart pounded uncomfortably against her ribs. "You're frightening me, Frederick. What's happened?" He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she had never seen him make before. "I owe you an explanation about Lady Caroline." "Oh." Adeline wasn't sure whether to be relieved or more concerned. "Your former connection." "My former mistake," he corrected grimly. "Caroline and I were involved briefly about 3 years ago. She was newly widowed. I was—" He broke off, shaking his head. "There are no excuses. I behaved badly. These things happen," Adeline said carefully. "The past is the past. If only it would remain there." Frederick's jaw tightened. "At the ball, Caroline informed me that she's with child. My child, she claims." The words struck Adeline like a physical blow. "I see," she managed, though her mind reeled with implications. "No, you don't." Frederick reached for her hands, clutching them almost desperately. "The timing is impossible. I haven't been intimate with Caroline in over 2 years." Hope and doubt warred within Adeline. Then why would she claim money, leverage, revenge? His expression hardened. "Caroline discovered that my interest in you is serious. She's threatened to create a public scandal unless I provide financial compensation." "Blackmail," Adeline whispered. "Precisely." Frederick's grip on her hands tightened. "I've spent the past 3 days at Ravencourt Hall. consulting old correspondence, speaking with servants who might verify my whereabouts during the relevant period. I can prove the impossibility of her claim. Relief washed through Adeline, followed immediately by concern. But if she's desperate enough to attempt such a scheme, she won't stop easily, Frederick acknowledged, which is why I had to tell you. Whatever happens next, I needed you to know the truth. Adeline studied his face, the strain evident in every line, the fear lurking behind his eyes. Fear not for himself, she realized, but for what this might mean for them. I believe you, she said simply. His expression cleared, hope replacing anxiety. You do? Yes, she squeezed his hands. Though I admit I'm curious why you're so certain the child cannot be yours, even after 2 years. Frederick's cheeks colored slightly, a surprising display of embarrassment from a man usually so composed. Because for the past 18 months, Caroline has been abroad, in Italy, then Vienna. She returned to London only a fortnight ago. Understanding dawned, and she could not be 6 months along as she claims. Precisely, Frederick exhaled heavily. But proving this publicly would be complicated, and regardless, the gossip would be damaging. He looked away. Damaging to anyone associated with me. Adeline heard the unspoken implication. He was offering her an escape, a chance to distance herself from the coming scandal. What will you do? She asked instead. Confront her with the evidence I've gathered. Offer a modest settlement to avoid public ugliness. Not because her claim has merit, but because prolonging this serves no one. His expression turned grim. And make it absolutely clear that any attempt to malign your reputation will be met with the full force of my influence and resources. Warmth bloomed in Adeline's chest at his protective instinct. You've thought this through. I've thought of little else these past days. Frederick's voice dropped lower. Except for how this might affect what lies between us. And what does lie between us, Frederick? Adeline asked softly, needing to hear him say it clearly. He met her gaze directly. Everything I never knew I wanted until I met you. A chance at happiness. A future built on mutual respect and, if I am fortunate beyond deserving, love. He hesitated, then added quietly, unless this changes your feelings. Adeline considered her response carefully. The situation was certainly not what she had envisioned when allowing Frederick to court her. There would be challenges, possibly scandal, definitely gossip. The prudent course would be to step back, to protect herself from the coming storm. Yet looking at Frederick, proud, vulnerable, honest, she found she couldn't bear the thought of losing him. Not when she was beginning to understand the depth of her own feelings. My feelings are unchanged, she said firmly, though I appreciate your honesty in sharing this with me. Relief washed over his features. I promise you, Adeline, this will be resolved. I won't allow Caroline or anyone else to come between us. We'll face it together, she decided, surprising herself with her certainty. Whatever comes. Frederick's expression softened with something that looked remarkably like adoration. Together, he repeated, as if testing the word. I like the sound of that. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, hands still joined, the garden quiet around them, save for birdsong and the distant sounds of London beyond the walls. Adeline felt a curious peace settle over her. The path ahead might not be smooth, but for the first time she was certain it was the path she wanted to walk, with Frederick beside her. I should return you to your father before he decides I've compromised your virtue, Frederick said eventually, though he made no move to release her hands. A few more minutes won't signify, she replied, reluctant to break the moment. Frederick smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and eased the tension from his face. A few more minutes, he agreed, though I could happily sit here with you until sunset. Adeline returned his smile, aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. They had faced their first true challenge and emerged stronger. Whatever Lady Caroline might attempt next, Adeline was confident they would weather it, together. The scandal, when it broke, was both worse and better than Adeline had anticipated. Lady Caroline, finding her blackmail attempt thwarted by Frederick's evidence, chose the nuclear option. She announced her condition at Countess Spencer's musicale, loudly lamenting that the Duke of Ravencourt had abandoned her in her hour of need. By the following morning, all of London was buzzing with the tale. Frederick's name was on every gossip's lips, his character dissected in drawing rooms across Mayfair. Some defended him, pointing to Caroline's questionable reputation and convenient timing. Others were all too eager to believe the worst of a man with Frederick's history. Adeline learned of the incident not from Frederick himself but from her lady's maid, who reported it with wide-eyed excitement while arranging her hair for the day. "They say Lady Sedley fainted dead away after her announcement, your ladyship. Had to be carried from the room by Lord Hartington himself, and now everyone's wondering what his grace will do." "Thank you, Ellis. That will be all," Adeline said firmly, dismissing the maid once her toilette was complete. Alone, she pressed trembling fingers to her temples. She had known this was coming, had steeled herself for it. Still, the reality was daunting. She could only imagine what Frederick must be facing. When her father entered the breakfast room, his grave expression confirmed her fears. "I assume you've heard," he said without preamble. Adeline nodded, pushing her untouched toast aside. "From Ellis? Is it as bad as she suggests?" "Worse, perhaps." The Earl sighed heavily. "Lady Caroline has played her hand well. Whether her claim has merit matters less than the damage already done." "It has no merit," Adeline insisted. "Frederick has proof. Proof that may convince reasonable minds but will do little to quiet wagging tongues." He regarded her steadily. "You realize this affects you as well. Your connection to Ravencourt is widely known." "I'm aware. And yet you seem remarkably composed." Her father studied her with narrowed eyes. "You knew this was coming." "Frederick confided in me 3 days ago." Adeline met his gaze directly. "He's been gathering evidence to disprove Lady Caroline's claim. The child cannot possibly be his." "I see." The Earl's expression softened slightly. "He told you before the storm broke. That speaks well of him. He's a better man than his reputation suggests." "So it would seem." Her father tapped thoughtfully on the table. "Nevertheless, this puts you in a difficult position. Some will shun you merely for maintaining your association with him." Adeline lifted her chin. "Then they are not friends worth keeping." A hint of pride flickered in her father's eyes. "You care for him deeply, don't you?" "I do," she admitted quietly. "More than I thought possible." The Earl nodded slowly. "Then we shall weather this together. The Humphreys do not abandon those we care for at the first sign of trouble." Relief and gratitude washed through Adeline. Her father's support meant everything. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he warned. "The coming weeks will test us all. Now, finish your breakfast. I suspect we'll have visitors soon enough, those seeking confirmation of rumors, if nothing else." He was right. By midday, the drawing room had received a parade of concerned acquaintances, each more transparently curious than the last. Lady Harrington expressed shock that dear Adeline had been taken in by the Duke. Mrs. Fitzhugh wondered aloud if there was any truth to rumors that Frederick had fled to the continent to escape his responsibilities. Young Lord Pembroke actually had the temerity to suggest that, with Ravencourt's reputation in tatters, Adeline might consider his own long-standing admiration. Adeline weathered it all with outward composure, neither confirming nor denying Frederick's guilt, merely stating that she reserved judgment until all facts were known. Inwardly, however, she seethed at the eagerness with which society condemned a man many had fawned over just days before. By late afternoon, when the stream of visitors finally ebbed, Adeline was exhausted. She retreated to her bedroom, dismissing her maid and sinking onto the window seat that overlooked the garden. Rain had begun to fall, matching her somber mood. A soft knock at the door roused her from her thoughts. "Yes?" Her father entered, an envelope in hand. "From Ravencourt." His groom delivered it directly. Adeline took the letter with fingers that trembled slightly. "Thank you." The Earl hesitated. "Whatever his decision, Adeline, know that you have my support." When he had gone, she broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper. "My dearest Adeline, by now you will have heard of Caroline's public accusation. I would have come to you immediately, but I feared my presence would only further damage your reputation. I have consulted my solicitors. We are preparing to present irrefutable evidence of Caroline's falsehood, including sworn statements from her own servants, confirming her travels abroad during the relevant period. The matter will be resolved, though not without temporary unpleasantness. What I cannot bear is the thought that you might suffer for your association with me. Society is cruel, particularly to ladies of unblemished reputation who dare to stand by those under scrutiny. I would understand completely if you wished to distance yourself from me until this storm passes. Yet I must be honest. The thought of losing you, even temporarily, fills me with despair. These past weeks have shown me what my life could be with you in it. I find I cannot return to the emptiness that preceded you. I will call tomorrow at noon. If you receive me, I shall know there is still hope. If not, I shall respect your decision, though it would break what remains of my heart. Yours always, Frederick. Adeline pressed the letter to her chest, emotions warring within her. Frederick's willingness to release her from their understanding was noble but unnecessary. Did he truly believe she would abandon him at the first test of their bond? She moved to her writing desk and penned a swift reply. Frederick, I will receive you tomorrow, and every day thereafter. Scandal be damned. Do not offer me an escape I have no wish to take. We face this together, as agreed. Yours in all weathers, Adeline. She sealed it quickly, before doubt could temper her bold words, and rang for a servant to have it delivered immediately. As she watched the messenger depart through the rain, Adeline felt a strange calm settle over her. For the first time in her life, she was absolutely certain of her own mind and heart. Frederick arrived precisely at noon the following day, his carriage drawing curious stares from passers-by. He entered the Humphrey townhouse with his usual dignity, though Adeline noted the new lines of strain around his eyes, the slight tightness in his jaw. They were not left alone. The Earl remained present throughout the visit, seated by the window with a newspaper he pretended to read. Even so, when Frederick took Adeline's hand, his touch conveyed everything words could not. "You received my note," he said softly. "I did." She squeezed his fingers. "My answer stands." Relief transformed his features. "I don't deserve you." "Fortunately, that's not for you to decide." Adeline smiled, hoping to ease his obvious distress. "Now tell me your plan." Frederick glanced toward her father, who lowered his newspaper slightly. "You may speak freely, Ravencourt. We're all allies here." With a grateful nod, Frederick outlined the strategy his solicitors had devised. "We'll present our evidence not in court, but to a select group of influential society members, those whose judgment carries weight. Lady Caroline's own lady's maid has agreed to testify that her mistress has not yet shown any signs of pregnancy. Combined with proof of her extended travels abroad, it should be enough to discredit her claim." "And what does Lady Caroline say to this?" Adeline asked. Frederick's expression darkened. "She maintains her fiction, though she's grown less confident. I believe she expected me to pay her off immediately rather than fight. She doesn't know you very well," Adeline observed. "Not as she thought." A hint of his usual humour surfaced briefly. "I've also sent word to Baron Sedley's family in Northumberland. They never approved of Caroline and will be eager to prevent her from using their name in such a scheme." The Earl folded his newspaper. "A solid approach. When will you present this evidence?" "Tomorrow evening. I've arranged a small gathering at Ravencourt House, just a dozen key individuals whose influence might stem the tide of gossip. We shall attend, of course," her father stated matter-of-factly. "Adeline and I both." Frederick looked between them, momentarily speechless. "You would do that? Publicly align yourselves with me at such a time?" "Of course," Adeline said simply. "That's what one does for those one cares about." Something shifted in Frederick's expression, a softening, a vulnerability rarely glimpsed beneath his ducal reserve. "I've never had that before," he admitted quietly. "People who stand by me, not for my title or wealth, but for me." Her father cleared his throat. "Yes, well, the Humphreys are notoriously stubborn about backing lost causes." His tone was gruff, but his eyes held surprising warmth. "Though in this case I don't believe the cause is lost at all." The remainder of Frederick's visit was brief but significant. When he rose to leave, he bowed over Adeline's hand with a reverence that spoke volumes. "Until tomorrow." "Until tomorrow," she echoed, wishing they could have even a moment of true privacy. As if reading her thoughts, her father suddenly became absorbed in retrieving something from a distant bookshelf, his back turned deliberately toward them. Frederick seized the opportunity to lean closer. "I love you," he whispered, the words meant for her alone. "Whatever happens next, know that." Before Adeline could respond, he had straightened and was bidding her father a proper farewell. She watched him go, those 3 words echoing in her mind, filling her with a certainty that transcended society's petty judgments. Ravencourt House stood like a fortress amid Mayfair's elegant townhouses, larger, grander, its facade illuminated by torches as Adeline and her father arrived the following evening. A discreet footman ushered them inside, past the imposing entrance hall with its marble columns and ancestral portraits, and into a drawing room where a small but influential gathering awaited. Adeline recognized most of those present: Lord and Lady Wentworth, whose opinion was respected even by the Queen; the Dowager Duchess of Clarendon, whose approval could make or break reputations; Admiral Blackwood, renowned for his unimpeachable honesty, and several others of similar standing. All turned to watch as Adeline entered on her father's arm, their expressions ranging from curiosity to approval to barely disguised disapproval. Frederick came forward immediately to greet them, looking more like himself than he had in days. Whatever burden he carried, he wore his title like armor tonight, every inch the Duke of Ravencourt. Lord Westbrook, Lady Adeline, thank you for coming. His formal words belied the warmth in his eyes as they met Adeline's. We wouldn't miss it, her father replied, loudly enough for all to hear. The Humphreys stand with those we believe in. A murmur ran through the assembled guests. The Earl's public declaration of support carried weight, especially given his own sterling reputation. The evening proceeded with careful precision. Frederick first thanked everyone for attending, acknowledging the delicate nature of the gathering. Then, with admirable composure, he presented the evidence refuting Lady Caroline's claim: sworn statements from her household staff, documentation of her travels abroad, testimony from her physician, who, while not violating confidentiality, confirmed he had observed no signs of pregnancy during recent consultations. Most damning of all was a letter from Caroline herself, dated 3 months earlier from Vienna, in which she complained of being utterly alone, with no prospects of changing my solitary state in the foreseeable future. Hardly the words of a woman carrying the child of a duke. As Frederick concluded his presentation, a heavy silence fell over the room. It was the Dowager Duchess who broke it, tapping her cane sharply against the floor. Well, that seems conclusive enough for any reasonable person, she declared in her carrying voice. Lady Caroline always was a theatrical creature. I recall her mother being much the same, forever manufacturing dramas where none existed. Admiral Blackwood nodded his agreement. The evidence is compelling, Your Grace. I, for one, am satisfied. One by one, the influential guests expressed similar sentiments. Not all were as emphatic as the Dowager or the Admiral, but the tide was clearly turning in Frederick's favour. By the time refreshments were served, the atmosphere had lightened considerably. Adeline found herself approached by Lady Wentworth, a formidable matron known for her shrewd assessments of character. You've chosen an interesting time to align yourself with Ravencourt, my dear. I believe in judging a person by their actions, not rumours, Adeline replied evenly. Lady Wentworth's eyes narrowed. And what do his actions tell you? That he's a man of integrity who faces challenges directly rather than hiding from them. Adeline met the older woman's penetrating gaze. And that he values truth above convenience. A slow smile spread across Lady Wentworth's face. Well said. Perhaps there's more to both of you than meets the eye. She patted Adeline's arm. He'll need someone with spine, you know. The title comes with considerable responsibilities. Before Adeline could process the implication of those words, a commotion arose from the entrance hall. Raised voices, a woman's strident tones, then the sound of someone forcing their way past servants. Moments later, the drawing-room doors burst open to reveal Lady Caroline Sedley, her face flushed with anger or exertion, her usual perfect appearance slightly dishevelled. "How dare you?" she demanded, glaring at Frederick. "How dare you gather these people to slander me?" Frederick remained remarkably composed. "Lady Sedley, you were not invited to this private gathering." "Private character assassination, you mean?" Caroline's gaze swept the room, noting the assembled guests with visible dismay. Her eyes widened further when they landed on Adeline. "And you've brought her. Your latest conquest. Does she know about us, Frederick? About our history?" "She knows everything," Frederick replied calmly. "Including the impossibility of your current claim." Caroline's composure slipped further. "You would deny your own child, after everything we shared." "There is no child, Caroline." Frederick's voice remained steady, but carried an edge of steel. "We both know that." For a moment it seemed Lady Caroline might continue her performance. Then, seeing the skeptical faces surrounding her, something in her crumbled. Her shoulders sagged, and a calculation entered her eyes. "Perhaps I was mistaken," she said carefully. "In my distress and loneliness, perhaps I misinterpreted certain signs." The Dowager Duchess snorted audibly. "Convenient timing for such a revelation, my dear." Caroline shot her a venomous look before turning back to Frederick. "I never meant to cause a scandal, Frederick. You must believe that. I only wanted—" "What you've always wanted," he interrupted quietly. "Security, position, revenge for perceived slights." He shook his head. "It's over, Caroline. Whatever game you're playing ends tonight." Something ugly flashed across her beautiful features. "You'll regret this," she hissed, dropping all pretense. "Both of you." Her gaze shifted to Adeline, hatred clear in her eyes. "Enjoy him while you can, Lady Adeline. He tires of his playthings eventually, always." "That's quite enough." The Earl of Westbrook stepped forward, his expression thunderous. "You forget yourself, madam." Two footmen appeared at the doorway, summoned by Frederick's discreet signal. "Lady Sedley was just leaving," he said firmly. "Please see her to her carriage." With magnificent disdain, Caroline straightened her shoulders and glared one final time around the room. "This isn't finished." With that parting shot, she allowed herself to be escorted out, her dignity in tatters, but her head held high. In the silence that followed her dramatic exit, Adeline became acutely aware of every eye in the room turning toward her. She had remained composed throughout Caroline's interruption, but now felt the full weight of scrutiny. What would society make of this scene, of her role in it? To her surprise, it was again the Dowager Duchess who took command. "Well, that was more entertainment than I expected this evening." She chuckled dryly. "Ravencourt, you certainly know how to host an interesting gathering." A ripple of nervous laughter broke the tension. Frederick moved to Adeline's side, his presence steadying. "I apologize for that unfortunate interruption," he addressed the room. "Lady Caroline is troubled." "Desperate, more like," Admiral Blackwood observed. "The scheme was transparent from the start." Lord Wentworth cleared his throat. "I believe we've seen all we need to see, Ravencourt. Your evidence was convincing before. Lady Sedley's performance merely confirmed it." One by one, the guests expressed similar sentiments. By the time they began to depart, it was clear that Frederick had won this particular battle. The influential voices of London society would now counter Caroline's accusations with facts, and the scandal would gradually lose its power. As the last guests took their leave, Adeline found herself alone with Frederick and her father in the grand drawing-room. The Earl, showing unexpected tact, announced his intention to examine a particularly interesting painting in the gallery adjacent. "5 minutes," he warned as he exited. "Not a moment more." When the door closed behind him, Frederick turned to Adeline, taking both her hands in his. "Are you all right?" Caroline's appearance was unexpected. "I'm fine," she assured him, squeezing his fingers. "Though I admit she's rather terrifying when thwarted." A surprised laugh escaped him. "That's one word for it." His expression sobered. "You were magnificent tonight, standing beside me, facing her down. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me." Adeline met his gaze steadily. "I meant what I said in my note, together, in all weathers." Frederick's eyes darkened with emotion. "Before your father returns, there's something I need to ask you." He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "It's perhaps too soon, given everything that's happened, but tonight has shown me that life is unpredictable, and some things shouldn't wait." Adeline's heart began to race as Frederick, to her astonishment, lowered himself to one knee before her. "Adeline Humphrey," he said softly, "when you fled to Derbyshire, I followed because I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. These past weeks have only confirmed what I knew then, that you are essential to my happiness, to my very existence." He took a deep breath. "Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Though she had begun to hope for this moment, the reality of it, Frederick kneeling before her, his heart in his eyes, stole Adeline's breath away. For a woman who had once sworn never to risk her heart, the journey to this moment seemed both impossible and inevitable. "Yes," she whispered. Then more strongly, "Yes, Frederick, I will marry you." Joy transformed his features. He rose swiftly, pulling her into his arms with a lack of restraint entirely at odds with his usual careful propriety. "You've made me the happiest of men," he murmured against her hair. "And I am the happiest of women," she replied, allowing herself to lean into his embrace. "Though perhaps we should compose ourselves before my father returns." Frederick chuckled, reluctantly releasing her except for her hands, which he kept clasped in his. "I should speak to him immediately. Request his blessing formally." "I suspect he already knows what you intend." Adeline smiled. "He wouldn't have left us alone otherwise." As if on cue, the drawing-room door opened, and the Earl reappeared. One glance at their linked hands and radiant expressions told him everything. "I see congratulations are in order," he observed dryly. "Assuming you've actually asked for my daughter's hand, Ravencourt, and not merely informed her of your intentions." Frederick straightened. "Lord Westbrook, I would be honored to request your blessing on our marriage. I love your daughter deeply, and will spend my life ensuring her happiness." The Earl studied them both for a long moment before nodding. "You have it. Though I warn you, Ravencourt, Adeline has never been an easy child. I doubt she'll be an easy wife." "I would have her no other way," Frederick replied with absolute sincerity. As they departed Ravencourt House that evening, Adeline knew that gossip would continue to swirl for a time. The announcement of their engagement would create a fresh wave of speculation, particularly given the recent scandal. Yet, for the first time in her life, she found she didn't care what society thought. She had found something infinitely more valuable than reputation. She had found love, with a man who had proven himself worthy of her trust. Epilogue, 3 years later. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the nursery at Ravencourt Hall, bathing the room in golden warmth. Adeline sat in a rocking chair, her son cradled in her arms, as he dozed after his feeding. At 10 months old, Edward James Montrose, future Duke of Ravencourt, was the image of his father. The same dark hair, the same imperious expression when displeased, the same devastating smile when charmed. The door opened quietly, and Frederick entered, fresh from a ride around the estate. His face lit up at the sight of his wife and son, a transformation that still made Adeline's heart flutter after 3 years of marriage. "How are my favourite people in all of England?" he asked softly, crossing to kiss first his son's downy head, then his wife's upturned lips. "Sleepy but content," Adeline replied, smiling up at him. "How was your ride?" "Productive. The new tenant at Brookfield Farm has excellent ideas for improving the drainage in the lower fields." Frederick settled into a chair beside them, reaching out to stroke his son's cheek with one finger. "Has he been good today?" "Perfect, as always." Adeline adjusted the sleeping baby. "Though I suspect he's saving his energy for tonight when we have company." Frederick groaned good-naturedly. "I still don't understand why we agreed to host your father and aunt for a full week. Because they adore their grandson and grandnephew, and because we owe them for standing by us when the rest of society wavered." She gave him a pointed look. "And because I said so." "Ah, yes, that most compelling of reasons." Frederick's eyes crinkled with amusement. "How could I forget the clause in our marriage vows, and the Duchess shall always have the final word? A wise addition." Adeline smiled. "One that has served us well, I think." Frederick's expression softened as he gazed at her. "Everything about our marriage has served me well, better than I deserve." "Nonsense." Adeline reached out to take his hand. "You deserve every happiness, Frederick. As do I." The past 3 years had not been without challenges. Society had eventually accepted their marriage, though some still whispered about the scandalous circumstances of their engagement. Lady Caroline had departed for the continent shortly after her humiliation at Ravencourt House, reportedly finding a wealthy Italian count to marry, a convenient distance from her London disgrace. More significant than these external matters were the internal adjustments they had navigated together. Frederick had to learn to share his life and decisions after years of solitary authority. Adeline had to adapt to the responsibilities of a duchess, to managing vast estates and a small army of servants. Both had to discover how to be partners in all things, to argue without wounding, to compromise without resentment. Yet through it all, their love had only deepened. The passion that had first drawn them together had matured into something richer, a profound understanding, an unwavering trust, a shared purpose that made even difficult days bearable. Edward stirred in Adeline's arms, his tiny face scrunching before relaxing back into sleep. Both parents watched him with identical expressions of wonder. "I never imagined this," Frederick confessed quietly. "A family, a son, A wife who challenges and delights me in equal measure. Not even when you rode through that storm to find me, Adeline teased gently. Perhaps then. He smiled at the memory. Though I was merely hoping you wouldn't send me away. I could never have dreamed you would build this life with me. Adeline thought of their journey, from her initial wariness to her flight to Derbyshire, from his dramatic pursuit to their stand against scandal and gossip. Each step had brought them here, to this sunlit nursery, to the family they had created together. I'm glad I fled, she mused, and I'm even more glad you followed. Frederick raised her hand to his lips. I would follow you anywhere, Adeline Montrose. Through storms and sunshine both. As would I, she replied softly. As will I always. Outside, the English countryside stretched peaceful and green around Ravencourt Hall. Inside, a duke and duchess and their sleeping son remained wrapped in the quiet miracle of their happiness. A happiness built not on fairy tale perfection, but on the sturdier foundation of love, tested and proven, of storms weathered together, of hearts that had found their home in each other. The end. Dear listener, there are moments in life when silence speaks louder than applause, and when truly staying, means more than 1,000 declarations. Tonight's story wasn't just about a duke and a lady, it was about you, about anyone who's ever doubted their worth, about those who've walked away from something beautiful, simply because they didn't believe they could be chosen, completely, truthfully, and without conditions. You see, in every one of us there's a quiet place that aches to be seen beyond the masks, a place that longs not for perfection, but for recognition. If life feels uncertain right now, if your world has more thunder than sunlight, remember this: the people who truly matter will not flinch at your shadows. They will find you, even in silence, even when you hide. So tonight, let yourself rest. Let your breath soften. Let the night hold you like a dear friend. Not everything has to be solved before morning. Some things just need to be felt and survived with grace. May sleep find you gently, and may morning greet you kindly. With affection. Legends of the Fall Team. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end. We hope this story brought comfort to your heart and reminded you that love, when real, never asks you to shrink. It invites you to bloom. Please consider subscribing to our channel, leaving a comment, liking this video, and sharing it with someone you care about. From the bottom of our hearts, your support helps us feel seen and encourages us to keep telling more stories filled with love, redemption, and life-changing twists. At the end of this video, another unforgettable story will appear. Click and be surprised by yet another emotional journey from our channel. Thank you for being here. Legends of the Fall Team.